On December 5th, 2017, at 7:30 p.m., I attended the Southeastern University Percussion Ensemble located in Bush Chapel. At first glance, this performance seemed dull due to the lack of people who showed up. Maybe the first couple rows of Bush were actually filled with people. Most of the people who did attend were family members and music major students who needed the credit for their major. The ensemble as a whole was smaller than the other ensembles that Southeastern University's music department offered. Overall, I really enjoyed the performance. The setup of the instruments was clearly planned out and allowed for each individual person to be seen during the performance. There were a total of 6 to 7 xylophones, the marimba, a vibraphone, glockenspiel, and crodels that were used on stage, followed by snare drums, a bass drum, various percussion instruments such as the triangle, chimes, cowbells, sleigh bells, and large bells used or inspired by the Pirates of the Caribbean. The first piece that the ensemble performed started out rather interestingly. There was one percussionist that played a snare drum from the back of the room. When finishing his few measures, across the room, another percussionist played back to him, and so on and so forth, until the 5 percussionists gathered at the center of the room to play the piece. There were 4 males and 1 female percussionist. The piece was called Five and Dime, arranged by Chris Brooks. It was a shorter piece that only consisted of snare drums. The tempo of this piece was in compound quadruple, and they used 16th and 32nd notes. Crescendos were executed by hitting the drum with more force. There were a few solos that were spread directly throughout the piece. This song was by far the loudest song of the concert. I honestly felt that my eardrums were going to burst at the beginning of the song because I was sitting on the edge of a pew, and one of the percussionists' placement was right next to me. Overall, it was an incredible sight, and they pulled it off very well. The second piece that was played was the Prelude for Percussion, arranged by Mallory Miller. There was a marimba and a glockenspiel that were used for the mallet percussion instruments. There were snares and 1 large bass drum. The glockenspiel gave the piece a very light bell-like sound and appearance. The marimba allowed for more depth and structure to the piece, which also played the melody. There was a tambourine that was added to add flavor, and it almost had an impression of ad-libbing to the song. There was also cymbals used in the back of the ensemble, and the person who played this instrument also played the tambourine. The marimba could be compared to a vocalist singing the verse and chorus of a song. The bass drum was used as an accompaniment for both the marimba and the glockenspiel. Overall, everyone that played was in harmony, and no instrument overshadowed another. The marimba wasn't louder than the glockenspiel, and the snare did not take away from the bass drum. There was a bright tone that was maintained throughout the song, and I believe that this piece was one of the best of the night. The third and final piece for the first half was called Freitress by Arvo Pärt. The marimba was used in this piece, and the percussionist who played this instrument completely blew me away. He used a technique of playing the instrument with 2 mallets in each hand. I didn't even think that was possible, and it added so much more interest to the piece. For the other xylophones and glockenspiels, the percussionists hit the bars with their fingertips instead of mallets. This provided a softer sound and added more emotion into the piece. It made the mood change to an eerie, dark, and mysterious sound. The marimba, however, was played with mallets, but they were wool-headed mallets, adding to the softness created by the fingertips. The bass drum was used to keep the tempo and become the underlying bass line. There were 2 different ranges of glockenspiels that were used, and they harmonized simultaneously throughout the entire piece to drag the melody along. The marimba was used as an accompaniment. The tempo for the piece was compound quadruple. The bass drum added necessary stress on 1 note. And after a certain amount of time during the song, the instrumentalists switched to mallets. As noted before, the marimba was played with wool-tip mallets, while the glockenspiels were played with plastic-tip mallets to give off a brighter sound. Overall, there were 4 xylophone instruments played, 1 cowbell, and 1 bass drum. In the end of the piece, the final 4 measures were repeated 3 times. To begin the second half of the concert and the selection of Christmas pieces, the ensemble started off with The Little Drummer Boy, a new arrangement written by Chris Brooks. To start off the piece, the snare drum began, along with sleigh bells adding harmony. There were 5 xylophones in total, and the bass guitar was used to keep the tempo for the underlying bass line. The glockenspiels was played with soft wool mallets which played out the distinctive melody. The 2 marimbas and another glockenspiel were played and harmonized within the melody. The song was played in 6/8 time, allowing for the drum set to play a solo. The conductor of the ensemble had total control at all times. During the drum solo, the conductor stepped away and let the percussionist really have all the attention on him. The second song played during the second half was Come All Ye, arranged by Jesse Matson. For some background on the song, the Latin translation is Adest Fidelis and is from the 17th or 18th century. During this piece, there was a guest conductor, Dr. David Mitchell. In total, there were 5 xylophones, a mixture of marimbas, xylophones, and glockenspiels. Plastic mallets were used to hit the glockenspiels, giving a bright sound. The 1 xylophone played the bass line. The glockenspiels were specifically used for harmonizing with the melody. The triangle was also played throughout the entire song. It was fascinating to see how one percussionist used both a xylophone and a glockenspiel simultaneously, moving across both instruments. This technique seemed fairly difficult, but the results were priceless and really enhanced the song. The third song that was played was the Silent Samba. This song was created in 1818 and was originally named Stille Nacht. To make a long story short, this is a spin-off of Silent Night. There was a mixture of xylophones, marimbas, glockenspiels that were used all together. There were 4 instruments from this mixture on stage. There was also a triangle that was used. However, there was no conductor present. The percussionists were completely on their own with the following the tempo and staying together. The meter was compound quadruple, and the shaker or maraca instrument was used that kept the meter. The technique of multiple mallets in one hand was used all across the board, with almost all the percussionists playing the various xylophones. There was a specific xylophone that had metal bars that sounded like a muted steel drum. I loved it. It made the samba feel so much stronger, and I almost felt like I was on a tropical island. This piece created much and added lots of culture to this concert, and I was very excited when I heard this song. The fourth song that was played was called Coventry Carol. Southeastern University's very own Dr. Brian Bloom arranged this piece. This song was created between 1240 and 1579 AD and was originally known as Lulle Lulle. There were a total of 6 xylophones on stage, a mixture of the various xylophones that have been present throughout the entire concert. This piece was played in the minor key. The notes that were heard created an eerie mood, and the dynamics that could be distinguished included crescendos, but had many decrescendos to counter them. I never really considered the piano a percussion instrument, but it is. I always thought of it as a string instrument, but there are little mallets inside of the harp of the piano that strike the strings to create the sounds that we hear. How cool is that? 3 out of the 6 xylophones that were used played the bass line. The glockenspiel was used to create and continue the melody, and it was also played with wooden mallets. This effect made me feel like I was in a nightmare or a horror film. 30-second notes that were played by the xylophones sounded like ghost wailings from somewhere around me. For the percussionists, their facial expressions didn't help either because they added to the eerie mood, having very neutral and somber expressions. Throughout the entire piece, the mallets were struck fairly close to the bars and didn't follow through at the wrist, creating a softer sound. The end note was fairly pleasant though, considering it was in the major key. Overall, this piece was very scary to me in the way that it sounded, but I enjoyed it very much so. It's crazy to think that this is actually a Christmas song. What Child Is This, arranged by Nathan Daughtry, was the 5th song that was played. This piece was a solo piece played by Jordan Self, a transfer junior this semester to Southeastern University. The technique that she executed with the double mallet per hand method was amazing. The right hand mallets played the melody, while the left hand mallets played the bass line. This accompaniment was flawless and sounded incredible together. She executed the crescendos flawlessly, and the dynamics of the piece went back and forth from piano to forte in a matter of singular measures. She also had many staccato notes that added great emphasis. However, there was a disaster that struck when she forgot a piece of her song. When she forgot the section, it was evident in her face, and she kind of laughed it off. She did recover from her mistake, and I believe she jumped to a different section. I believe that she could have played messing up off a little better, but the rest of the song was very well done. I applaud her for continuing on and not letting this minor setback hold her back from completing and finishing out the accompaniment strong. The final piece of the performance was called Deck Them Halls. Not Deck the Halls, Deck Them Halls. This arrangement was created by Chris Crockle. The bells that were used were the large Pirates in the Caribbean inspired bells. I don't really know the name of them, but that's what they sound like to me. Chimes were also used as well. Wooden mallets were used for the xylophones because this song was a bright and happy song, so it required bright and happy loud notes to be played. Staccato notes were enforced from the snare drum, and the fa-la-la-la-la-la part of the lyrics were played in the minor key, interestingly enough. There were various random noises that came along with some of the instruments that added flavor, but I felt were oddly placed. Halfway through the piece, the tempo switched to a laid-back jazz feel, and at the very end of the piece, there was crowd participation in singing the final fa-la-la-la-la-la-la-la. Overall, this performance was incredible and my favorite so far. I really enjoyed the beginning of the concert and the way that everything was set up. The transitions were smooth and the intermission was an awesome benefit to have. This concert rocked, and I will totally attend more percussion ensembles in the future. I really enjoyed how the conductors and the percussionists took into consideration that it is the holiday season and chose to perform holiday songs as well as their own music that they had been preparing. It was great to see everyone come together and listen and enjoy this music put on by our students. I hope that this ensemble will further grow in the amount of percussionists that come to Southeastern University, because this is a fairly small percussion ensemble, and people have more of a love for this type of music that isn't very common or isn't very sought out after due to the lack of lyrics and vocals. But I really enjoyed this piece being a vocalist myself, and it really intrigued me to want to learn more about the percussion.